Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of Tru Offseason. Tru Offseason number 2. See you later. You can see that there's a little bit of a theme for this one. We got a bunch of Seattle Seahawks news to talk about, or I guess we should call for one of them Las Vegas Seahawks, because the Las Vegas Raiders are pulling a lot of Seahawks players over there from Seattle. And the last time a Seattle Seahawk quarterback came into the AFC West, it didn't work out too well for that AFC West team. But they didn't have a coach like Pete Carroll, and the Raiders do have a coach like Pete Carroll. So we shall see exactly how all of this is going. But we want to welcome you all here. Of course, when I say we, I'm talking about myself. I'm talking about Chase Oliver. Chase, how are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing good, man. I love the off season. It's ramping up. We've had the combine. We have a bunch of interesting trades and releases that are happening.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. The new league year starts, I think, Wednesday. So I'm super
Mhm.
excited to see like all the crazy stuff that's going. Like the biggest market team in Chicago that would look like they're going to pay for a bunch of guards. They end up trading for a bunch of guards. So I'm like, oh wow, now the guard market is wide open. Just a lot of good free agents. I love it, man. I love it. It's the false hope. You see your team signing all these players, and you're just like, oh yeah, man, we got so and so. We're
if
making a
they if
difference.
they if they gave out Super Bowl trophies for the offseason, the Chicago Bears would have won it 5 years in a row now. Pretty handily too, between getting rid of Mitch and bringing in Justin, then changing a coach, then bringing in Caleb, now changing the coach. It's a whole cycle. It's a whole circle. There's a meme about it too, like you are here in the Bears cycle, but we are here to talk about all the different things that are happening around the league. To your point, we did have the scouting combine last week, the underwear Olympics, as it is called. Some interesting things happened there. We had a couple quarterbacks looking good, a couple wide receivers looking good as well. Matthew Golden is one name that definitely stood out,
Oh
thanks to
yeah.
how he did the drills and how his speed was. One guy that I'm interested in, Tez Johnson, kind of fell a little bit because of how he weighed in and then his speed and everything. So there's a lot of things to talk about. But before we get into all of that, we want to thank you guys as always for tuning in. If you have not already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel, and we're continuing to grow. True Heel Heat Sports and Entertainment to do a lot more in the off season for football. There's also the other sports that we talk about here. There's also all the entertainment side of things. We just had a Cobra Kai conversations. I know Sid was handling that. He's a big Cobra Kai fan. But let's get into it, because to Chase's point, the scouting combine, it can tell you a lot, but it can also tell you very little. Because there's so many different things that are at play there. There's people who are not going to be at the scouting combine whatsoever. There are players who are going to be at the scouting combine but aren't going to do anything. So, for example, Ted McMillan not coming to the combine. However, Shador Sanders does show up to the combine, but he's not throwing. But
Hmm.
you're able to see the little things like Shador being there to support his former teammates who are now in the draft process, and also to have different interviews with teams. And some of those interviews may have rubbed some teams the wrong way from what we're seeing. So it's some things to discuss. And Chase, what are some of the things, if anything, really big that stood out to you from the scouting combine? Because I was looking a lot at the wide receivers and I was looking at the running backs. But was there anything beside? I mean, if you anything from wide receivers and running backs, but also anything in general that stood out to you?
Yeah, man. Some of these cornerbacks, like the blue chip cornerbacks, like Will Johnson and stuff, they kind of took a hit. They didn't have really great combine performances. James Pierce Jr. seems like his draft stock has gone down. I think James Pierce Jr., if you go based off talent, is a top 10, if not a top 5 talent in this draft. But I guess those interviews were as bad because teams are looking at him and saying, "Oh man, like he went from bona fide, oh yeah, people won't care. His talent will carry him into the top 10 to I'm seeing some mock drafts have him at 22, go to
Yeah.
27. I feel Ted McMillan made a mistake not doing the exercises because it allowed a lot of other players to boost up the ranks. Like, hey, Ted, I get it. You have the size, you have the hands, you have a lot of things going for you than all these other prospects, but you not running a 40, that was kind of at least do the 40 and do the catching drills and stuff. Like, do that, but he didn't do anything. So I felt that hurt him a lot. And he went from a guy that was going to be top 10, and that top 10 money is a lot different than you
Yeah.
being in the 11s through 17. Like, I've seen like lows for Ted McMillan at like 20. And it's not crazy that he could fall there. He could actually fall to 20. But yeah, I think a lot of receivers, like especially like the Matthew Goldens, like you mentioned earlier, and just a lot of other good talent, they have risen their draft stock really, really well. But I think it's a shout out to the quarterback. Some of the like Brady Cook had a really good
Yeah,
combine.
he really, yeah.
He really like. I was like, I liked him out of Mizzou. I said, hey, this kid's pretty good. And he really had one of those combines where you say, oh, you know what? He could be a fringe starter in the NFL. I'm not saying like a starter, but if he goes to the right team, the right situation, if a team uses their round 2 pick on him,
Mhm.
you're not going to be mad if they go with him because he actually showed a little bit of something at the combine there. So I felt all the quarterbacks except for Will Howard, they did themselves a service because they looked all really good, to be honest. None of them looked that did throw. None of them looked, besides Will Howard, looked horrible. Well,
Was
Will
it
Howard,
was it last year or was it a couple? I think might have been a couple years ago. Where I'm trying to remember, there was a quarterback that wasn't anticipated to go that highly, and then at the combine, like there was concern about a deep ball. I think it was something like that, and was throwing deep balls like nobody's business, and helped move himself up. I think it may honestly, I think it may have been JJ McCarthy last year, but I forget off the top of my head because I think one of the knocks against him was that whole system quarterback, and it's designed to be a run scheme, run first thing from Michigan. So can
yeah,
he make deeper throws? I think it was JJ McCarthy. Now that I
yeah,
think,
it was JJ, yeah, because JJ had a
and
really
so
good
you know,
combine.
to your point, Brady Cook, he may not be moving up into the first round, but you can turn yourself into a good backup quarterback who has the potential to be a starter. We're going to get into a quarterback that may have that in his future. I mean, we're going to see what happens with free agency. Hint, hint. It's Sam Howell with the Seahawks. But there's a lot of things that can go right for players. There's a lot of things that can go
Mm-hmm.
wrong for players. The scouting combine. So on the one hand, I appreciate the scouting combine still for who it can help, and I also appreciate the scouting combine for the sense of evening the playing field because Ted McMillan definitely doesn't look as good. I mean, he's probably still going to be drafted pretty highly, but there are some mocks that are seeing him drop because we are seeing wide receivers go and show out. One thing I will say that I did like was the NFL, because I was watching on NFL Network, which I think was the only person broadcasting it. But one thing that I did like about NFL Network's production quality, what that I thought was really cool, was when they were doing the 35 drill for the wide
Mm-hmm.
receivers, and the average person, you're not necessarily thinking about it in a game context of, oh, a guy's turning and catching, turning and catching, turning and catching, and then running. Like how does that really factor in? And one thing that I really did like, and I don't know if you saw it, but if you didn't, as I describe it, you will appreciate it. That they did was they showed the 35 drill for a certain Lad McConkey when he was at the scouting combine,
Yeah,
and then seamlessly moved from him doing the 35 drill into quite literally catching a football from Justin Herbert
yeah,
on a 35-yard line and then turning and going up. And so you can see that, yes, it's called the Underwear Olympics, and yes, it is it's sort of having a jokey connotation to it, but at the same time, you can see how some of these things and some of these measurables are going to play into things that happen on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays. Is every single vertical jump important? Probably not. You could argue it's a little bit more of the drills that are going to be important, but those measurables are important as well, because there's a player right now that's requesting a trade, and one of his stock in trades is jump balls. You want to be able to see if a DB is going to be able to jump high enough on a vertical jump to be able to potentially knock that ball out of that person's hands. It's interesting to watch from that perspective, and I think that there are ways to make it a little bit more of a, I don't want to say show, but feel a little bit more important than it currently is, because there are a lot of players now that just skip it and just do their own pro day and things like that. But if we're talking about things that are important, we are a couple days away from the start of a new league season. On Monday, the legal tampering period begins, which has always been a funny thing to me, because teams are definitely tampering in the illegal time frame, but the NFL just doesn't do anything about
Yeah,
it. So,
how did Alex Kappa all of a sudden agree
yeah,
to deal with the Raiders?
what's the point of a legal tampering?
What he got released, and then the Raiders were like, "Yeah, we'll sign him," and it's like,
It's like,
how?
wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But it's a time honored tradition of illegally tampering during the legal tampering time portion. But there are a lot of players and a lot of big names that are going to be available. A couple of them we haven't had full confirmation, but like there's pretty much obvious. For example, Dahlman, the center from the Falcons, it's pretty much a guarantee that he's going to get cut. The Falcons just don't have the money to pay him. They gave Kirk Cousins that contract, and then they knew kind of that with Kirk and paying him that money, regardless of whether it was Kirk or a different quarterback, but paying someone of that money amount, there's gonna be hurt that comes along with it. And for the Falcons, it kind of sucks, because it looks as though Kirk is going to be a very expensive backup to Michael Penix Jr., but you never know. A year removed from that ACL tear, what Kirk Cousins is going to look like in training camp and OTAs. But it looks like your really good center is not going to be the one snapping in the ball, and that's the joys of the offseason, where last year the Falcons fans are saying to themselves, "Hey, we got Kirk Cousins," to the not as joyful part of this season this year, where they're saying, "Well, okay, we Penix has looked good, but O-line was an issue. How are we going to fix this?" So let's talk about some of the big names that are going to be available, but also some of the big names that have asked for trades. And I think let's start with trades, simply because it's a little bit shorter of the big names, but they are two really, really big ones. And the first is none other than Seattle Seahawks wide receiver DK Metcalf, the person I was just talking about, who has that physicality and the ability to jump and catch those jump balls. He's not like the best at it, but he is one of the better jump ball specialists in the NFL, just because of his size, because of his strength, just the way his body is set up, his natural genetics. He has the ability to box out DBs and come down with passes. And back in the day, it was Russell Wilson throwing him moonballs. This past couple seasons, it's been Geno Smith, but he is asking for a new home. And I think he knew that some of the writing was on the wall with some other aspects of Seattle Seahawks stuff. We also saw the release of Tyler Lockett. So what's going to happen there with the DK Metcalf trade, and what would the Seattle Seahawks want back? That's going to be something that's interesting. Chase, if you had to, we could say we'll look at this from two directions. The first is like realistic. What's a realistic trade, and then where do we think he would best fit? So for me, I think a realistic trade. It depends on what they want. They've said that they want a first and a third back.
Yeah.
I think that they could get it if the third round pick is a 26 pick. I think
Yeah.
they can get away with getting a 25 first rounder, but if you're asking for a 25 first and 25 third, I think it becomes a little bit of a harder thing to pull off. I think a realistic team that would be willing to spend that might be the Jags.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be a cap issue for them. And that's part of why they just did a release of Evan Engram, but they have Brenton Strange there. But that would be a realistic trade, that partner who could afford from a draft capital standpoint to make the trade. I'm wondering if the overall cap space will make it work for them. Another team that I think could be realistic and would probably have to give a 25 third if they did could potentially be the Buffalo Bills, because they also are in need of a wide receiver, but in that first round pick, that's pretty far back in
Yeah.
the draft. So I think that's a situation where if Seattle wants both picks to be in the same year, they have a little bit more leverage if they are on the phone with Buffalo. But I think the place that I would probably like him to go to the most, I think it'd be really, really interesting if the Buccaneers could pull it off.
Oh yeah,
Simply
they
because
could.
him and Evans combined, you just don't know who's coming down
Yeah.
with that pass every single time. And it's great for Baker Mayfield because Baker Mayfield is an absolute gunslinger of a quarterback, and you've got Jalen McMillan there and Kate Otten for the underneath stuff. I mean, it's going to hurt Mike Evans's campaign for death taxes and Mike Evans getting 1,000 yards. But from a competitive standpoint, it definitely does help the team. So who do you think is realistic, and then also where would you want him to go
Yeah.
outside of realism?
I'm with you on the Jaguars. They'll just have to figure out the cap space situation because they also like DK. DK is not going to go to the team unless they promise him the contract that he
Right,
wants.
right.
So that's another thing. That's why I'm leaning towards like the Patriots. Now I know the Patriots have the number 4 overall pick, but they do have early second round picks. So even though if the Seahawks don't get a first out of it, the
Yeah,
Patriots have all these day 2, day 3 picks that they could offer. Plus, they have some players that also want to be traded anyway. So they might have a player or two that they can send back to Seattle where it's like, oh, yeah, we traded away decap. Sure, we didn't get the first, but we got like Dalvin Goddard and the 2025 second round pick from the Patriots, an early second round pick that gives us leverage if we want to move back up to the first round and get that first round pick, or and get a couple day threes out of it. So, and the Patriots have cap space. I look at it where Vrabel, he looks at DK Metcalf, looks at him and he goes, he's just like his teammate AJ Brown, and I coached AJ Brown, and I got the most out of AJ Brown. I can
yeah,
get the most out of DK Metcalf. Not only with the 4th overall pick do we get a legit offensive lineman for our quarterback, but we give Drake May a legit number 1 option entering his prime. Now Metcalf, he said he wants to go somewhere warm. So so like that's the only problem with New England. New England is not warm. It's a cold, frigid place. So that may be the only holdup. But I feel like that's the super most realistic option. And if Seattle gets a package that's just like, hey, we don't get the first, but we're gonna get that, they'll take it. They'll take it because that second round in the 4th, you trade that up with maybe one of your day 3 picks. Like, hey, you can move up back into the first round in the mid-20s easily. There's teams that are always looking to trade back up. I would love if he went to the Chargers, obviously, but it's not
yeah,
happening.
yeah.
Look, the Chargers have a lot of cap space. We can obviously re-sign DK Metcalf. Him and McConkey would be a great 1-2 punch for Herbert. We can always throw back Quentin Johnston to them as well. The Seahawks were interested in Johnston. It's just I don't see the Chargers with all the holes they need to fill looking to say, hey,
Take this
let's
first round.
not you take this first round pick in 22. Like they have a lot of holes to fill. And so like that's the thing with the Chargers where it looks great and stuff, but I feel DK we won't see much action on him until draft day. If it
Yeah,
happens in the new year, Monday will be telling because Monday we'll know where some of the free agents are going and stuff, and
right,
they'll be
right.
officially signed Wednesday. So Monday, that will tell you like which teams are in contention with DK Metcalf, and we'll probably be back next week to talk about that. But Monday will be like those are the teams that we'll for sure like know like okay these are the teams that are in contention for DK Metcalf because there's guys like Godwin, Adams, DeAndre Hopkins. Even though yes he's a little washed, teams are going to still pay for him. Stephon Diggs, yes, he's coming off an injury. Teams are going to pay a little bit of money for him. There's a lot of wide receivers on this market. Keenan Allen's another name out there. So once you see like who, yeah, Amari Cooper. So once we see who goes where, then it's like, oh, okay, we know where those guys are going. These are the teams that will trade for DK Metcalf. But yeah, I would love for him to go to Chargers. It just doesn't make sense to trade the 22 overall pick and then later on, like, even though Johnson hasn't shown a lot of improvement, a younger wide receiver on a cheaper deal and then another pick just to get DK Metcalf. Like if you can get DK Metcalf or Johnson in a second, yeah, sure, go right ahead. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that will take place. But yeah, I think New England makes a lot of sense. It's just the weather is not to DK's liking. You know, he wants to play in a warmer state. You know, but it is what it is. You got to deal with it, buddy.
You know, I'm wondering if and it looks like, you know, we just mentioned one of the names, but if Diggs, if the bid for Diggs is too rich for the Texans, do you see a situation where they could try to make the trade? I know that they're going to have to be this season and the next season, they're going to have to already be opening conversations with CJ Stroud, but it is one of those situations.
And Will Anderson.
But it is one of those situations where once you sign CJ Stroud, you have to be able to draft the wide receiver versus acquire the wide receiver via trade or free agency. So it could be a situation where, you know, I'm wondering if they try to make the trade, sign DK, and then down the road restructure and say, well, you know, we'll figure something out down the road money wise. The cap continues to increase. The only team that seems to have an issue with the cap is the New Orleans Saints, and then of course the Bengals because they just don't want to spend any money. But
spending money in the wrong places.
Yeah, the Saints find themselves in cap hell because they're trying to be too creative with the cap versus the Bengals who are just like, no, I mean, we don't. You said we can spend it, not that we have to spend it, so we won't spend it.
The Bengals are like that online franchise team. They never sign anyone in free agency. You're just like, bro, are you even trying? And then they just draft players, and then even the players they draft, they don't resign. Like, oh, it's too expensive. I gotta keep this cap. For who? Who are you keeping this cap for? Yeah, for who? You already got your quarterback signed. Yeah, I think the Texans could actually be an interesting proposition because we've seen with the Texans, they're uber aggressive. They've been uber aggressive in the DeMeco Ryans era. I mean, trading up for your quarterback and then getting the edge rusher that you love. That was like a super aggressive move. And then I could see it too, where it's like, hey, they traded for Christian Kirk. And then they add a DK Metcalf to pair up with the Nico Collins. You give Stroud a lot more weapons to kind of work with. And then, you know, Houston, you know, it's a great place. No state tax. DK can get his money. Like you said, they'll have to restructure. And it is coming up where Stroud and Will Anderson are offered a lot of money. But if they feel like, hey, Stroud's regression was because, like, we didn't have the weapons with him at all times. Nico Collins, his health is an issue. Same with DK's. DK is not the most healthiest guy, but if one or two of them are on the field at the same time, that or just on the field in general, that helps out the Texans. So yeah, I could definitely see it where the Texans are also players and stuff. It's just more how aggressive they want to be. You know, if my dog Will Levis would have worked out, the Titans would have been all over this. They would have, but it didn't work out for them. No, dude, if Will Levis worked out.
I'm telling me it's true. I'm laughing, but it's true.
Dude, Will Levis, can you imagine just chucking bombs at ZK? What? That's Sunday ticket right there, man. That's what you dream for.
Oh, you know, God, I can't believe I'm going to make this reference. Only because it was in my head earlier. But the Lizzie McGuire, hey now, this is what dreams are made of.
Yeah,
that's yeah. If Colleen didn't have headphones in right now, listening to the new Lady Gaga album, she would be over the moon about that reference. But let's talk about another guy who is requesting a trade, and that is none other than a guy who was in contention for Defensive Player of the Year. He didn't win, unfortunately. That went to good old Pat Surtain, but this is none other than the Bengals' Trey Hendrickson. And Trey Hendrickson has also requested a trade similar to what DK Metcalf did. He led the league in sacks last season, but that doesn't I don't know, since he just does not want to pay the guy. So he is saying, all right, well, if that's what's going to happen, then let me get some let me get a change of scenery. Let me get some plane tickets and move myself and my family to somewhere, some greener pastures. And so when we talk about Trey Hendrickson and what he provides to a team, you could make an argument that the Bengals defense, as pretty terrible as it was, the only help that they kind of were able to give Joe Burrow last year was from Trey Hendrickson getting those 17 and a half sacks. But those sacks are going to have to come from someone else. And so the question is, who is Trey Hendrickson going to be applying his trade for in the 2025 season? There are a lot of different potential landing spots for him. I've seen teams such as the Commanders and the Bears. I mean, pretty much any defensive player that is any good, you are hearing tied to the Commanders. And then if they are an edge rusher, you're seeing them connected to the Bears. But I think either one of those two landing spots would be really good. I think I know that the Commanders released Jared Allen. And if I'm looking at it from the Bears standpoint, and I have to make a decision on whether I want to make a trade with the Bengals for Trey Hendrickson or sign Jared Allen, I would rather sign Jared Allen, only because why am I saying Jared Allen?
I was gonna say, what year watching?
Yeah.
Myles Garrett? You talking about Myles Garrett?
No. Is it Jonathan Allen?
Jonathan Allen, yes.
Jonathan Allen. That's it. I was like, I know it starts with the J. Why can't I remember this?
I was like, what you watching?
I was like, Jared Allen. Yeah, now Jared Allen. I'm like, oh, because Jared Allen wasn't the Bears. But Jonathan Allen, I stand corrected. But if I was the Bears trying to pick between Jonathan Allen and Trey Hendrickson, I would rather have Jonathan Allen because that only costs me money. Whereas in the case of the Bengals, it's going to cost me draft capital and money. And I have the money. The money's not the issue. The question is, just similar to the situation with CJ Stroud and the Texans, if you have Caleb Williams under a rookie contract and you just brought in Ben Johnson, you want to kind of give Ben Johnson the ability to make as many draft picks as possible to surround Caleb with the players that he identifies. As good as Hendrickson is, he's going to be coming from a different system versus you being able to instill a defensive system in a rookie who is much more inclined to listen to you and, put his best foot forward. That's not to say that Hendrickson wouldn't. It's just it's like, if in the case of, we'll use wrestling as an analogy. When people get hired by WWE, no matter how good they are, the majority of them go to NXT for a reason, because it's about learning how to work the WWE style. More often than not, if you were coming just from the indies, you don't know that when you're hitting your finisher, you need to be facing the hard camera. It's the little things. And so you gain good habits, but you also, the good habits that got you signed by WWE, but you also gain bad habits as well. And similar to that, Trey Hendrickson has been in the league for a good amount of time, that he's gotten good habits that got him 17 and a half sacks, but he's also gotten some bad habits. And it's a little bit easier to work with a college kid coming into the NFL than it is to necessarily work with a player that's already there. So why give up the draft capital if you don't have to? So where would you want Trey Hendrickson to go? Where do you think he will end up?
I think all the best teams for him to go to are in the AFC, like the Colts. I think him on the Colts would shore up that defensive line for sure. Like they just need an edge rusher to pair up with Latu and Kwity Paye. But I don't think the Bengals will trade him within the conference, just because I could totally see the Colts, if they're like one of those weird wild card teams that sneak in. Trey Hendrickson gets up for the playoff game, and it's like, oh yeah, this is why we should have kept this guy that got 17 and a half sacks 2 years in a row for us and has been one of the best defensive ends in football. I see, Commanders, they definitely need edge rush help. They need something to pair up there. The Bears, they've been trying to find the partner in crime for Montez Sweat for the last two, ever since they traded for him. That was the goal, find the partner in crime. But like you said, I would rather just pay Jonathan Allen, get that good interior guy to pair it with Montez Sweat. They're former teammates at Washington. They kind of know each other already. It works out. Heck, why not? Just sign Chase Young while you're at it, too. Just bring back the whole band. Bring back the whole Washington football team.
Bears.
Yeah, the Washington Bears. Why not? Yeah, just do the whole defensive line. Why not? Um, I think Green Bay is another interesting pairing. I think him, Rashawn Gary, that'd be a good 1-2 punch. And I think Green Bay has the cap space to sign him to a longer deal. It's just for Trey Hendrickson. He has been really good, but I understand why the Bengals are like, oh, we really can't pay you because you're 30 years old. And so when we pay you, and it's different. There's certain positions in the NFL where it's like it's hard to justify paying certain players. Edge rusher is one of those positions. It's very hit or miss because the reason why guys like Von Miller and Khalil Mack will still get money no matter what and still be in the league is because they're still athletic freaks and stuff. There's still freaks of athleticism there. JJ Watt, one of the things that left him and why he wasn't as dominant in his later years was his athleticism. Like it just, I'm sorry, us white people, the genes of athleticism degrade faster, and Trey Hendrickson is of that pigment. He's white. The speed that you have, it's by the time you turn 31, 32, it just goes by faster. I'm sorry, the positions you can stay in the NFL for many years are safety and linebacker and quarterback. Those positions you can stay as long as you want because as long as you can throw, as long as you have certain skill sets, you'll do well there. If you have the knowledge of the game, you can
Yeah,
be at those positions.
especially for safety and linebacker.
Yeah, edge rusher, you just turned 30. You're leaving your athletic prime. You possibly only have 2 years left. The Bengals have two young wide receivers they want to pay money to, and you know the Bengals are notoriously cheap, so they just want to keep as much cap space as possible. I understand why they don't want to pay Trey Hendrickson that money because they can give him a 5-year contract, guaranteed that most of that money, and then they're stuck with him for 4 years as he goes down in value. Might as well get him at the best value you can. And so I understand it sucks that the Bengals are in this situation. I feel bad for the Bengals fans because he is one of your bright hopes on defense, and we all know the offense wasn't the issue. But when you pay a quarterback like Joe Burrow, you have a top player in the NFL like Jamar Chase, you have a great number 2 wide receiver like T. Higgins. Those guys are going to have to get paid. So it's up to you what you want to do with that money. So yeah, but I could see a lot of teams going for him. I wouldn't be shocked too if the Falcons they give out like the best offer because they have no
Yeah,
one. They literally have no one at edge, and they overpaid for Matthew Judon. They gave the Patriots a 3rd-round pick for Judon last year. So I could see them doing the same thing where they just say screw it, we don't have cap space anyways, and we can find a way to pay Hendrickson the money he wants. But even if Hendrickson's like, you know what, I'll just play 1 year in Atlanta. Fuck it, I'll just play this 1 year. I've been
yeah,
in the NFC South before when I was with the Saints. It's a crappy division. We have a chance. Young quarterback in Phoenix. Screw it. I'll just do 1 year in Atlanta and then go get paid in the offseason. And I'm sure he'll do well there. So, yeah, there's a lot of teams that could actually go for Trey Hendrickson. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a shocking team where we're just like, wait, what? How did he get him?
yeah. That is true. It will be interesting to see because both him and DK Metcalf, are players that you're trading for in order to sign. So it is a situation where we'll have to be paying attention to it because both of those guys are going to be asking for and deserving of large amounts of money. So how that will affect the team going forward and their strategy for building for the other roster spots that they need to fill, we'll see. But there are also teams that have already announced the fact that they don't need to worry about certain roster spots because they have re-signed some players. And two of the big names that have been re-signed, let's talk about. The first that we should mention is none other than Zach Bond. Zach Bond, who was one of the standout players for the Eagles in the Super Bowl, helping them win the Super Bowl, returns on a 3-year, $51 million deal. It makes him the league's 4th highest paid linebacker on a year-by-year value. And man, that's money well earned. And the Eagles, it's great problems to have for the Eagles when you think about it, because you're going from bringing in Saquon Barkley, and you just paid AJ Brown, you're paying Devonta Smith, you just paid Jalen Hurts not too long ago, and you still find money to pay Zach Bond. And that's the story of a well-run franchise. If you're able to do these things while still remaining competitive, because they're going to be making moves in further moves in the offseason, bringing in new people. And so, yeah, you still got to pay the Jalen Carters of the world, but that's a problem for down the road. You want to make sure you avoid being like the Saints and ending up in cap hell. But so far, the Eagles have done pretty well with that. Did you Zach Bond was also considered to be a potential trade target because of the potential high cost of signing him? What do you think of Bond returning to the Eagles, or I should say staying with the Eagles?
I like it. The Eagles, they pretty much signed this guy on a proven contract because he was just a special teamer in New Orleans, and then he worked his way up as a starter, and he became an All Pro this year. Made a big play in the Super Bowl, intercepting Mahomes. I like this signing. Might as well keep this guy. He still can play at a high level for the time that you have him, and I honestly think it's an easy contract to move or cut if it doesn't work out. But yeah, he played really well. He definitely earned this money, and it just shows the Eagles how they're able to keep certain talent. Like they just built this team so well. Like they've just built this team so well, and it's good on them. And I'm happy Zach Bond got paid. A guy that worked really really hard, and he found a way to become an All Pro. Hey, sometimes in the NFL there's late bloomers, man. So love it. I love seeing those late bloomers shine. So shout out to Zach Bond getting that paycheck.
Yeah, Bobby Wagner stays with the Commanders on another 1-year deal. I want to say that's not a surprise because Bobby Wagner is getting up there in age, but at the same time, he's playing really well. And for the Commanders, he was one of the real bright spots on that defense, helping to kind of bring that defense together and get the job done for certain drives that the Commanders needed a stop, because with the way the Commanders play the game, you want to try to get a lot of points very quickly and not let the pressure up. And Bobby Wagner's brain is designed to never let pressure up. And you saw it when he was with Seattle, and you see it now with the Commanders. And that's the kind of the field general that you want in your linebacker core. So congratulations to him for another 1-year deal. But we now have to talk about I'll let you expound upon this person's selfishness. But Max Crosby has decided to stay with the Raiders.
Ridiculous.
It's a little ridiculous. To your point, that the Raiders are, it's a team that has undergone so much ups and downs and upheaval, and they've tried many different ways to win. The majority of them have not worked, but one person that always kind of worked, no matter what they were asking him to do or asking the team to do, was 98 for the Raiders, Max Crosby. And now he becomes the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, a 3-year, $106.5 million extension with $91.5 million guaranteed. His $33.5 million APY, he's going to be in Vegas till 2030, I think, with the way that contract is set up with the extension. So it's a big get for the Raiders to be able to keep him, considering all of the upheaval. You think to yourself, man, these players may not want to be in Raider black and silver and white. They may want to be playing for a different team because we're not able to get the job done. But sometimes money talks. And Chase, well, tell me just how selfish that money talk was with Max Crosby.
Super selfish. Man, Max, you don't want to win. You talk about on your podcast, you want to win. This might be my last time, yada, yada, yada. That doesn't mean anything. Once they gave you that contract, you signed as fast as you could. You said, screw sending me to Detroit. Screw sending me to a contender. I'll be a Raider. I'll waste my prime years as a Las Vegas Raider. That's what Max Crosby did. He's just wasting his prime years. He's 27 years old. He has the Raiders are gonna pay him all this money to be a great All-Pro edge rusher for the next 3 years, and probably will amount to nothing. I am very sick by this by Max Crosby. Why can't he just leave us alone? Why
I was
why
about
does
to
he have
say,
to?
are we
Why
are
can't?
we are we coming from this from a position of Max Crosby is actually selfish, or are we like we would just prefer it if he was
Yeah,
not playing Justin Herbert
this
and Bo Nix
the,
in the draft?
this guy is just really good at football. Like it was the like I knew he was good, but it was the Chargers Raiders game where it was that weird game on Sunday night where if the Chargers and Raiders tied, they would have both made the playoffs. It was the one where Coach Staley called the timeout. Should have called the timeout when he didn't need to. Raiders were going to run out the clock, and Coach Staley was just like, "Oh man, I got called timeout, idiot." Good luck with that, New Orleans. But yeah, it was that game, and I was just like, Jesus Christ, this guy's one of the best players. Like, if you go back and watch that tape, sure, he was going against Storm Norton, but sometimes, like, when you're a top edge rusher, sometimes like backups will get you and stuff. No, he kicked Storm Norton's ass every single play. It was just ridiculous how good he was that game, and that's what I expect from an elite level player compared to like a backup. Like, if you know a backup's in there, kick their ass. Like, there's been times where I'm just like, dog, you're facing the backup tackle. Why are you struggling? Nope, every play he was there. He was there, and I was just like, this guy, he just has a nose for the football. It's good for the Raiders to keep someone like that because he seems like their de facto leader, and it's like you went from it brings some type of calmness to a lot of the Raiders because it's just like, man, all our star players, they just want to leave. They don't want to be here. They just get traded. Like, what's the point of this team? Keeping a guy like Crosby is good for the Raiders, and will it amount to anything? I don't know. It's the Raiders. Like, anytime you want to say, like, oh, yeah, this is a great step for them, they end up taking 3 steps backwards. And that's just how the Raiders work. So I'm happy they were able to keep him. Glad the dude got paid. He's going to get paid well into his 30s. And then afterwards, like, if the Raiders don't work out, he will still have a little bit of a prime left before the white athleticism leaves him to where he can go sign on to a championship contending team and ring chase for like the last 2 years of his career. But yeah, no, shout out to Max Crosby. He definitely has earned that contract. He's just absolutely tremendous. Anytime you watch him play, he's just tremendous. Like, he's just such a disruptor in the run game, in the pass game. He just kicks ass, and it sucks that we have to watch that 2 times a year again, and
Yeah,
just have him terrorize quarterbacks and running backs that we have. So not fun to always play Max Crosby.
no, but sometimes you got to release players. Sometimes you make players available for trade. Sometimes you re-sign your own players, but sometimes you also trade with teams and acquire players. It's a concept here in the NFL, and one of the reasons why that when we were talking earlier about DK Metcalf to the Texans as a potential, why the Texans may be trying to get ahead of the Diggs situation, being potentially outbid, and why they may not be interested in DK Metcalf, at least from the price perspective, like for looking at it from a cost perspective, is a trade that went down when the Jacksonville Jaguars, like a day or so after they said they were going to be releasing Christian Kirk, decided instead to trade him to the Texans. And you think and I was thinking about this when I saw the trade happen. I was like, when we talk about this, Chase is going to be able to get to talk about his favorite GM, Trent Baalke. But Trent Baalke overpaid for Christian Kirk like a mother. Like it was
He set the whole
ridiculous.
he set the market because he
It was
paid Christian Kirk, and
ridiculous.
then like AJ Brown was like, "Yo, where's my paycheck?" He changed, like, he ruined the like Balky paid Kirk so much money, he ruined like a bunch of teams' plans. They're like, "Oh, okay, we'll do this," and then all of a sudden he got paid, and then the receivers were like, "Oh, this guy, he got
To,
paid that much?"
to put this in perspective, when they overpaid for Christian Kirk, and it was an overpay because it was like $19 million a year on average for what they were paying him. It was after he had put up 982 yards and 5 touchdowns in 17 games, 11 starts for the Cardinals. And then they said, you know what? We really want 982 yards. We'll say 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's what we are going to overpay for, because that contract was a little ridiculous, is putting it mildly. But they are trying to the new GM is trying to rectify that because it was a 4-year, $72 million contract with $37 million guaranteed. Now, what the Jags have done is they are going to be saving about $10.4 million on the salary cap by sending him to the Texans, and in exchange, all the Texans had to do was give a 7th-round pick. And I was like, wait a minute. That was honestly the part that threw me the most, and that's when I was like, oh, Chase is going to be able to get to talk about Trent Baalke. Because even if you want to say that Christian Kirk isn't the greatest of wide receivers, a 7th-round pick seems almost insulting.
Yeah.
Like almost like on the one hand, if like imagine if you're Christian Kirk and you hear the news that you're going to get traded to the Texans, and then you're like, oh, okay, and then you go on Twitter or whatever to see what were the terms, because maybe the Jaguars don't tell you, and then you find out that one, the Jaguars were willing to accept something as little as a 7th-round pick for you, which means they don't really give a shit about you. Granted, they're trading you in the first place, but that's how little they're happy to just get you off the books. And then on the flip side, you go, wait a minute. So the team that wanted me was like, what's the least amount that I can pay to get Christian Kirk? And granted, like that's what the team should be doing in theory or on paper. But at the same time, you kind of want to be like, damn, it couldn't have at least been a 6th-round pick. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So it is kind of a funny situation. But now, if you are the Texans, let's look at this from the Texans' perspective. If you're the Texans, you only had to give up a 7th-round pick for a pretty decent, like he's not a great wide receiver by any stretch of the means, but you are giving up a 7th-round pick for a receiver that will be able to fill something of what Tank Dell does, because Tank Dell is undergoing ACL surgery. He's going to miss the 2025 season completely. And it's very possible that his career is done because of his size, taking hits like that. With an ACL, you take a year to recover just from the surgery itself. It usually takes 2 years to get back to proper form, and you're already an undersized receiver, and by then you will be pretty much done with your rookie contract, and you weren't a 1st-round pick, so why would they need to do any kind of crazy extension? There's going to have been 2 years of wide receivers by the time they need to talk to you about an extension. So it sucks for Tank Dell on a personal level. But from the Texans' perspective, how do you feel about, granted, we don't know any other move that they're going to make when it comes to bringing in a wide receiver, either through the draft or through free agency. But pairing up Christian Kirk with Nico Collins, and you have Joe Mixon, and then you have Dalton Schultz, and you got Cade Stover waiting in the wings. How do you feel about the passing options for CJ Stroud? Because we noted that last year, you and I definitely noted that O-line regressed and they could not protect Stroud.
Yeah.
And he was having to get the ball out faster and faster and faster if he was going to get anything done. So how do you feel about the addition of Christian Kirk to the wide receiver room of the Texans?
I like it a lot because, like they barely have to give up anything for him. It makes it where you don't have to go desperate to get another wide receiver. Like the only time like you'll probably go all in is like we mentioned with DK earlier by trading your 1st-round pick, which is going to be in the mid-20s. So like to me, I like it a lot because you get a guy that's reliable, a guy that was that helped Trevor Lawrence out like this first year in Jacksonville, has been just a good steady hand at receiver for his time in the NFL. Like, yeah, he had the injury last season, so that kind of hurt him. But I think Kirk can bounce back. He's a little bit bigger. He's one of those surprisingly bigger players. When you see him, you think like he's some like 5'9" guy, but he's actually like 6'1", and he can run really fast. So I really do like this pickup for the Texans because they get him for what, like 2 more years, and they have Christian Kirk. And if he regresses, no harm, no foul. You only paid a 7th-round pick for him.
It's a 1-year deal.
Oh, okay, 1 year. So yeah, no harm, no foul. It was a good deal at the end of the day. So I like it a lot because Kirk can kind of fill the hole, especially if Collins does have consistent injury stuff. Like Kirk has been healthy most of his career. Like this last year was his only really injury bug year, but other than that, he's always been healthy. So I like it a lot. I think the Texans are doing the right things to help CJ Stroud not regress, and they're trying to make sure he's on the right track of progressing as he comes near the end of his rookie deal, and they'll have to extend him because you're not going to find any other quarterbacks with his talent unless you just completely stink and you guys get a chance to draft Arch Manning or something, then that's when you trade Stroud. But I don't see that happening with the Texans and the division they play in. So
Yeah, they'll be good for enough wins to be outside of the either outside of the top 10 or like just like maybe pick 9 and pick 10 and then moving up. It's just too like you'd basically have to have Stroud as part of the trade deal if you're going to move up, because the team that's up there, they're up there for a reason. But let's talk about a team that has been up there multiple times, and that is the Chicago Bears. They had the first overall pick thanks to the Carolina trade, but it wasn't that long ago that they had a very high pick, and that's when they had taken Justin Fields, and they had the number one overall, which they traded to Carolina, and which the Carolina's pick, like I said, became the number one overall, but they get Caleb Williams. Then with pick 9, they take Roma Dunze. It doesn't really work out. A lot of the problems is because of the offensive line, and so they're still picking pretty damn highly this go around, if I remember right, and I do have Tankathon up here somewhere. The Bears are currently picking, barring any trades, they are picking 10th. So they are still in the top 10. But at least they do have that franchise quarterback, or they believe they have the franchise quarterback, I should say. And with Ben Johnson coming to town, all eyes are on how he was going to rebuild that offensive line. So what he did was he contacted the Kansas City Chiefs and said, "Hey guys, Joe Thuney, do you think he might be available?" And the Chiefs said, "Well, I mean, yeah, it just depends on the price, really." And it's important for the Chiefs because real money is a big concern for them.
mm,
Granted, their team is fairly young. Like that was one of the points during the Super Bowl, one of your points during the Super Bowl, but one of my overall points throughout the year was that they something has seemed off, and part of that has sort of been the offensive line for Patrick Mahomes. And the Chiefs said, "Well, we've built it up pretty strongly, but we feel as though we can afford to let Joe Thuney go." And so they've sent him to the Chicago Bears for a 2026 pick. I think it's a 2026 6th round pick, if I remember right, or it might have been a 2026 fourth. Yeah, I think it was 2026 4th round pick, but it wasn't that expensive for the Chicago Bears to acquire Joe Thuney. Meanwhile, the uh, the Chiefs get to move a fairly large cap hit, about $16 million, off of the books. So it works out for the Bears. It works out for the Chiefs. But if you are the Chicago Bears, or you're a Bears fan, which you are, it is you are. That's your NFC team from because of your family ties. How do you feel about Joe Thuney coming in to the Bears organization? And actually, we have it both ways. How do we feel about losing Joe Thuney for the Chiefs?
I actually like that they lost Joe Tooney because he's actually like a good veteran guard in the NFL. So I'm happy that they lost someone that could actually help protect their quarterback. But I think this is good for the Bears because they do still have issues at the tackle positions, but the interior of the offensive line got much better with Jonah Jackson, who's very familiar with Ben Johnson's scheme. He was with Detroit before he went to the Rams, and so he's familiar with what Ben Johnson does. He just had a bunch of injuries during his time with the Rams. And then Joe Tooney, he's just one of those guys. He's just a natural leader. He's a good locker room presence. And so I think they did a good job with those two players because once the Chiefs said, "Hey, we're attacking the other guard that they have that's really good, Trey, whatever his name is, Trey Smith."
Oh,
Once they said what, yeah, once they tagged him, it was like great. We lost the guy that everyone wanted, and then the rest of the guards, like they're all good, but you kind of want those established guys in there. So getting two established guys that are already on contracts, and you guys know you have cap, and you don't have to worry about it. And now you don't have to sign these guys to massive deals. You can use the cap to where they really love to use the cap. They want to shore up that defense for whatever fucking reason. The Bears, like, they want to make sure the defense is all filled out at the end of the day. So yeah, no, I like this move a lot for the Bears just because you're getting very good, stable starters, and especially with Joe Tooney, a really good starter that will definitely help Caleb Williams in year number 2. So and Tooney he showed he can kind of play everywhere on the offensive line. So worst case scenario, you can just kick him out to tackle. He's not the best at tackle, but he can play it if
But
needed.
if he's not the best at tackle, but if you need him for a reason. It's because the guy you do actually have at tackle sucks.
Yeah.
But one thing that I do
Like the
think
Chiefs, their guy tackle sucks, so they're like, oh,
one thing that I do think about these offseason moves, though, is it makes it very interesting to see what's going to happen with DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift as a running back last year, he didn't have the best performance. I mean, he's not like the world's greatest running back in that sense, but he's was better, or he has looked better in the past than he did last year. And part of that was running behind the just terrible, abysmal Chicago Bears offensive line. So the question there is going to be, how does that help? Because it's if you have a rookie quarterback, and you and I have both said this before, the two best things that you can put for a rookie quarterback is a quality tight end and a good running back. And they had a quality tight end, or they have a
yeah,
quality tight end in Cole Kmet. They just were like, well, what if we throw the ball elsewhere? And it was like, well, I mean, you can, but why waste the guy? And so I think that we're going to see a lot more Cole Kmet in this upcoming season from Ben Johnson, particularly how he used Laporta last year and the year before. Very intriguing if you are a Cole Kmet fan or a Cole Kmet manager in Dynasty or in fantasy football, or you're looking to draft him. That's going to be a potential guy that's moving up some of the tight end charts there. But from DeAndre Swift's perspective, you're going to be able to afford Caleb Williams a little bit more of a safety valve, in the sense that you don't have to be throwing the ball all the time. You will have the ability to run the ball a little bit more if you have DeAndre Swift running behind a much better offensive line. I mean, granted, part of the reason why Swift has looked good was because he was either in Detroit or he was in Philadelphia, which had really good, great, particularly Philadelphia offensive lines. But if you can get some of that magic back for Swift, that really helps Caleb Williams. And more importantly, that really helps people like Roma Dunze and DJ Moore, because DJ Moore in particular works very well off of play action. But it's harder to pull that off if the defense isn't going to bite on the fact that DeAndre Swift could be getting the ball. If they're like, hey, we can stop DeAndre Swift because we're going to get past, we're going to be able to penetrate the offensive line, you don't have to have your linebackers come up to try to block, to try to go get after DeAndre Swift. And
yeah.
now if you do, that's going to allow DJ Moore to get past them and only have to deal with maybe a cornerback, maybe a safety, versus you're doing a little bit more short intermediate passes and you're having some issues there. And if you have Roma Dunze as like that sideline guy, and even more of that field stretcher, it gives you a lot more of opportunities. And that's going to be something to really pay attention to. I know that the Bears, I would not, actually, now that we're talking about it, and I know it's far ahead, the draft, but the draft is coming up very soon. With the number of running backs that are available in this draft, what do you think about the potential for the Chicago Bears to draft a running back and pair that person with Swift to
Oh, it's
get
high.
their version of Sonic and Knuckles?
High. Ben Johnson has said it. The running backs are important to him, so he needs to have he did have Swift in Detroit, so that kind of helps him out. But I don't know how much he liked him. Detroit didn't like him as much, but having a guy like Swift, you already have one running back, so it'll be interesting to see. Do they draft a young running back, or do they say, "Hey, screw it, we got Swift. Let's pay money for a guy like Nick Chubb or something, or a Najee Harris.
Well, don't forget
Get someone
the
like
other
that."
aspect. The other aspect is the Roshan Johnson factor.
Yeah,
And they were using him more last year. They were using him more as like that goal line thumping back.
yeah,
Which was really letting him run. Towards the very end of the season, like the last quarter or so, they were getting Roshan Johnson more touches between the 20s. But that's also a possibility. That's why I wanted to ask you that question, because Roshan does present an interesting problem if you are the Bears, because you still have him under a rookie deal and you can afford to save that money and use that money elsewhere and use the draft pick elsewhere as well, potentially
Yeah.
continue to build that whole line.
I think Ben Johnson wants more competition because he did, like, there was that third running back that they also had in Detroit that was more of their pass catcher. So I think
Craig
he
Reynolds,
wants so I think he wants three running backs that he can trust. Two are going
mhm.
to be like the main bell cows. They will kind of do a little bit of everything, give defensive spits because there's that one's really fast and one's more of a thumper. So that's why I'm like, they could also, just sign someone, or like if Omarion Hampton ends up not going in the first round and he ends up going into second, that's one where the Bears will probably use one of their second round picks on like a Hampton and stuff. So I see a lot of different things, but yeah, I know the Bears. I think for any of the free agent running backs or just running backs in general, they're going to be prime players for them, and they'll offer them decent enough money where the running backs will feel compensated and feel like, oh, okay, yeah, this is great. Yeah, I'll definitely go to Chicago, and then and understanding that the role is not going to be the number one guy; it's to share the number one responsibility with DeAndre Swift. And like I said, he could probably just hate Swift, and he probably just like, I don't like this guy whatsoever. So I'm going to sign someone. Roshan is going to be one of my guys, and then I'm going to draft a really speedy guy at running back. So, there's a lot of possibilities for the Bears with their draft situation and with their free agent signings. But I do think that he's going to have at least three running backs that he trusts on that roster, similar to what he was doing when he was play calling at Detroit.
And last but not least, when we talk about trades, there's the guy that whose face we are covering up right now, because a couple days ago it was like, okay, Tyler Lockett, they're going to release him,
Mm-hmm.
and that sucks if you are Tyler Lockett was an amazing field stretching guy. He
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
like a superstar wide receiver. He was a very quiet, underrated guy that was more of a background. He didn't make a lot of noise from like that superstar diva mentality of wide receiver, but he was just quietly competent. And from a historical franchise perspective, he was actually very important. There is a Tyler Lockett, like there's a reason to remember that name if you are a Seahawks fan. But Father Time remains undefeated, and the Seattle decided to move on from him. The same day, there was news, of course, that DK Metcalf has requested a trade, as we covered earlier. But interestingly enough, the player that gets traded that nobody kind of really had on the bingo cards was none other than Geno Smith. And where does Geno Smith end up? He gets to reunite with the guy in this picture, none other than Pete Carroll and the Raiders. And it cost the Raiders a third round pick. And if you are the Raiders, you got to be really happy,
Mm-hmm.
because you did not really want to run into this season with Aiden O'Connell as the quarterback. Like, that guy has the distinction of letting the DPOY get that 100-yard interception return off of him, which is played in the highlight videos. And you don't want, like, that's not really what you want to do. But on the flip side, you are picking sixth. So it's hard to get one of either Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. And if you're not in love with Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, well, then it's even tougher, because why would you want to spend the capital to either move up or see if they fall? It's just not there. So you need to make a move, and you do by only having to spend a third round pick. It's not that expensive to acquire Geno Smith. From the Seattle perspective, I didn't expect it. Like this morning, I did not expect that. Now, Geno Smith, not an expensive quarterback. $25 million was his cap hit for this year, but he was looking to get the contract extension. And you can argue that Geno has earned some kind of a contract extension. I mean, he definitely has. Whether it's in the range that he wanted, that is a little bit of a trickier thing to determine, because for every great Geno play that he made as a Seattle Seahawk, there was also some really poor decision making. So a lot of those interceptions were on him versus on the players that were there to protect him, or on the wide receivers he was throwing to. So maybe Pete Carroll believes because he knows him well, he can, continue to work out those kinks. But he said, hey, a third round pick, that's not rich. That's not too rich for my blood. I'm going to go get Geno Smith. For the Seahawks, it really makes things interesting because now you are in a similar position to what the Raiders were just in. Are you going to enter this season with Sam Howell as your quarterback? Because the Seahawks, it's not even a situation where like the Raiders pick sixth, and so they were like, okay, what can we do? Could we potentially want to move up to get Cam or Shador? They are picking, I think it was pick 18 or something like that. So they had a good enough season to be knocking on the door of the playoffs. So that's I don't really know exactly what they were planning on doing. The only thing that I can think of is that they know, and similar to what we were saying with the legal tampering thing and how it will affect the wide receivers and the DK trade, is they know that they can get Sam Darnold. I don't know what other free agent quarterback that is available that is going to be able to be enough of a difference maker. And it was really, I kind of feel bad for people who have Jackson Smith and Jigba in fantasy for dynasty purposes.
Yeah.
Because in one day you were like, oh, Tyler Lockett's gone. Like it's a guaranteed that JSN targets are going to go up. And DK wants a trade. I mean, that could go either way because DK draws some coverage that allows JSN to do what he does. But on the whole, it's a good thing. Then all of a sudden, now you're going, wait a minute. So it's who throwing JSN? But hey, if you can get Sam Darnold, then things look a little bit more interesting. But one thing that I think was really funny is that originally the Seahawks were pitching to the Raiders.
I thought it was crazy.
That they would trade Geno Smith and DK Metcalf just for Max Crosby. I was like, wait a minute. That's just so you really just didn't give a fuck. Like you just want like we want Max Crosby. And the Raiders, credit where credit's due. We're like, nah, that's okay. You can hold on to DK Metcalf, but you can definitely send Geno. Like we'll hold on to Max, you hold on to DK, but send us Geno, please. So it's a fascinating situation to me just because of the sort of incestuous relationship between these two teams, with Pete Carroll being the head coach of the Raiders, coming from Seattle, where just a year ago he was a consultant. He was part of the executive staff of the team. So what are your thoughts on the Raiders acquiring Geno? And what are your thoughts on now, at least for right now, for maybe the weekend, Sam Howell being QB1 for the Seahawks? And where do you think it goes with Seattle?
Yeah, no, Geno, I think for sure. Like, I think the Seahawks realized that they needed to rebuild really badly because they lost their a franchise legend in Tyler Lockett, and then DK Metcalf is asking for a trade, and then you're stuck with Geno Smith. And if you have a bad season with Geno Smith, great, we paid Geno Smith all this money and we're having a bad season. I think it's just best for them to just say, screw it, let's just start with the rebuild. They talked about it too. There was a report that came out that the Seahawks were looking at drafting a quarterback in the draft. So that probably ruffled Geno the wrong way, like saying, hey, what's wrong? Like, am I not good enough? And so you don't want to bring the rookie quarterback in an awkward situation where it's just like the veteran doesn't want to help him out. So
Yeah.
I feel like with this one, it was just the Raiders. They're just like, look, I don't think we're getting Ward or Shador. We don't like any of these other quarterbacks. Like the Raiders are looking at all the other quarterbacks and they're just like, we don't like any of them. Like Jackson Dart is not going to be our answer. It's not that Dart's bad. It's just they looked at it and they said, like, if we were to bring in the rookie right now, it wouldn't help. But you bring in a guy like Geno Smith, who's a veteran, fits kind of with your receivers timeline, can get the ball to Brock Bowers. But now that sixth pick, it becomes a luxury pick where you talked about it. Hey, maybe the Raiders just say, screw it. Let's just take the best talent available. Let's just draft Genty. We already got the young tight end. Let's get the young running back that, will will fit with what we have. We have the offensive line where like offensive line's not an issue. We have our tackles set. So let's go ahead and draft what we believe is the best player available, just like we did with Brock Bowers. Like we didn't really need him. We had Michael Mayer, but he was just available. We said, fuck it. You know, like because the Raiders, they were enamored with Michael Penix. That was the guy that they wanted. And then he got miraculously taken. And then Bo Nix was their backup plan. And then he got taken. And then they were just like, fuck. We were just going to take Brock Bowers then. Screw it. We'll just take this freak tight end. I can see the same way where it's just like they don't like what they see. And they look at it where it's like, hey, defensive side of the ball, we're good. Let's just get a running back that could help relieve the pressure off Geno Smith. And we have a last place schedule. Who knows where we could go? We look at the Chargers last year where they had a last place schedule close to it. They get Harbaugh, and then they became a surprise sleeper team in the AFC West. It could be the same thing with the Raiders where they say, hey, screw it. We could be that team. We could be the sleeper team in the AFC West. Maybe the Broncos and Chargers, they take one little step back, and we can take a step up this season. And we got a guy and a quarterback that we can trust and Geno Smith. Now, will Geno Smith lead you to the promised land? That is yet to be seen. Like, we don't know if he can. Like, Seattle obviously showed that they don't believe in him because they traded him, and they just got a third-round pick for him. That's it. Like, you know, Geno could have at least fetched a second-round pick, but they settled with the third-round pick. Like, when people say Seattle won the trade, I'm like, they only got a third-round pick from him. Like, that's not winning the trade. Winning the trade is getting a high second or a first-round pick for a top 10 level quarterback in the NFL and Geno Smith. It's like Smith is a top. Does he have the best decision making? No, but in today's realm of quarterback, Smith is on that upper echelon of top 10. Yeah. And the Raiders pretty much like, who are they going to draft in the third round better than Geno Smith? If anyone, the person they drafted would be on the same level as Geno Smith right now. So that I felt it was a good trade for the Raiders more than the Seahawks. I felt this is the Seahawks just saying, hey, we got to rebuild, and they'll definitely be drafting a quarterback. There must have been a quarterback they really like that they say to them they're keeping close to the best. Could they sign Sam Darnold? It's a possibility. I don't see them doing that because, like, I don't think Darnold is like a good bridge quarterback. Like, I think if they sign a quarterback, it's more of a bridge. It's like a guy that's just there so the rookie, whoever they take this April, can take over mid-season. Like, the rookie will learn a little bit. Because Darnold, because that'll be like the same situation, like with the Matt Flynn and Russell Wilson situation. They paid Matt Flynn all this money, and then Wilson just ended up actually being really better. And then they were paying Matt Flynn all those years because Wilson was on the rookie deal. So I could see that that'd be the same situation.
The reason why I think that Darnold is like one of the potential choices, and probably like is one, if you are like if you're trying to compete. You know, even if you are doing a rebuild, but you're trying to compete, it's tough to have just a bridge quarterback because the problem there is you identify different pieces on the team that you want to have as part of the rebuild. But if you don't win games, they're going to start asking for trades. Like there's and to the point that the Seahawks were in the thick of it for winning the division, and they are still in a situation where they are having DK Metcalf request a trade because they can't get over the hump. And it's one of those things that you're going to have players who are good who are going to say, do I want to be on this team while they're doing a rebuild? And that's going to be tough to be doing a rebuild if you have to be competitive in some ways in order to keep those players. We talked about this with the Patriots, and so far it's worked out for the Patriots. But like, you have a halfway decent offensive line, but are there going to be players that are going to want to leave because they're not looking and seeing great things happening? For example, you could, if you're a Tariq Woolen or even a Devin Witherspoon, some of those players are going to be like, well, I'd rather get traded out of here. I'd rather just leave. So we'll see what happens. I will say that their new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, was just with the Saints, was with the 49ers, comes from the Kubiak Shanahan style of offense. It's going to be really interesting with K9 and with Charbonnet next season, particularly seeing who they get as quarterback. It could be a real running game situation for Seattle to kind of control that control the clock and help out whoever is behind center. But one thing I will say, I'm gonna be pissed if the Raiders do draft Gianti. It makes the most sense for
Yeah.
them to get Gianti. But like, can you imagine a situation where they're able to play ball control offense with Gianti and Brock Bowers, and then on the defense they
Mm,
have Crosby just hitting people?
mm.
Like, is that not a Pete Carroll like just wet dream?
Yeah, that's a great offense. Yeah, you just need to find that burner wide receiver too, just so that way you
Yeah,
can throw deep
yeah.
balls. Like, yeah, man. Yeah, that's
And you still got Jacoby Myers, who is not like a ridiculously old player. So
no,
like
he's
you
good.
still
Yeah,
got
he's
Jacoby
good too.
Myers.
Yeah, he's reliable. I mean, he's only dropped like what, like one ball in his whole career or some shit like that. Like some crazy
That was
stat.
honestly that was the crazy thing with Jacoby Myers. It because let me see exactly how old he is. Yeah, 28. He'll be 29 during the season. So he's still got like 2 to 3 years left.
Yeah.
But like, it's a situation where he like it didn't matter if it was Aiden O'Connell, if it was who was the other guy last year besides O'Connell?
Minshew.
Gardner Minshew, if it was Aiden O'Connell, if it was Jimmy Garoppolo beforehand, you throw him the ball and he just catches it. It didn't matter
Yeah.
what quarterback, which is a testament to the wide receiver skill. Another player similar to Tyler Lockett, who has gone very underrated, has had a quietly competent career, and has just made a decent amount of money. I mean, for NFL standards, it's an amazing amount of money
Oh
for
yeah.
people not in the NFL. But a regular average 9 to 5 people. But like that's a great player to have if you are building for the future, because when whoever you do bring in, whatever rookie wide receivers you do bring in, that's the guy he just sits them down and goes, "This is how you play. This is how you play football." And if
Yeah.
you
No.
he just shows them the pay stubs and he goes, "If you want to make money like this, this is how you and if you're better than me, like from a physical perspective, you're gonna be able to make more. But like if you want to at least make this,
Yeah.
what you do."
No, yeah. And Myers will probably also get one more contract just because of how reliable he
Yeah.
is. There's going to be a team that's like in playoff contention. It's like, yeah, we'll sign him for 2 year, 16 mil. He'll get like 8 million a year. Like, yeah, because like what his Raider contract's not that expensive. I thought it was just like a 3 year, $30 million contract, something like 3 year, 27 mil. Like he's not making a lot per year. I don't think. I think he's only
So
making
it's
like nine and a half.
I pulled it up. So it's 3 years, 33. He's in the last
Okay,
year.
yeah, see, not that bad.
Yeah, he's in the last year of it. But like these were his cap hits. Ready? $4.18 million, 9.5 million dollars, and then this year just shy of $15 million. Like not expensive. I mean, we were just talking about what the Jaguars were paying Christian Kirk.
Yeah,
Like it's not expensive
yeah. No,
at all.
Jacoby Myers, super reliable. Like I said, I think he only has one drop in his whole career. And he's been in the NFL for like what 6, 7 years. To have only one drop your whole career, that's insane.
Yeah. So
And
that'll
I don't
be
even think they count as a drop. Like I think they said he fumbled it or something, so it didn't count as a drop. But that's sure-handed. Like I remember his first 2 years in the league, it was like a meme because like the Patriots would always like throw him the ball, but then he didn't get a touchdown his first 2 years, and then he
right.
finally got a touchdown like his third year, and the team was celebrating like they won the Super Bowl because he finally got a touchdown.
Let me take a look at this. Oh, I mean, he's had some drops, but like it's not been anywhere near bad at all. And like he's put up numbers. So it's like it's a great person to have in the team, and it's a great person for the wide receivers to be learning from as they bring people in. Because Trey Tucker, we didn't even talk about Trey Tucker, but Trey Tucker is on that team, and that's gonna be a guy to look out for. But before we get out of here, a couple quick things. First is that, and all of these things that are happening, whether it's people getting released for money reasons, whether it's people requesting trades for money reasons, if you think about it, for people who are getting re-signed, people who are getting traded, there's also another way that teams can figure out salary cap issues, and that's restructuring contracts. Now, I don't know which one to talk about first because they're both kind of funny. But you know what? Let's get the grosser one out of the way. The Browns have restructured Deshaun Watson's contract yet again, creating $36 million in cap space for 2025. That gives them a little bit of wiggle room. If you're the Browns, honestly, I would have just let Deshaun Watson keep the money, because after I gave Deshaun Watson the contract and I saw how that turned out, I just wouldn't even trust myself anymore to make a decision with the $36 million. Like I'd be like, hey, Chat GPT, who should I try to sign? Like if that's going to be what you try to do. But I mean, if you're the Browns, you got to be tired of being last in the division. You got to be tired of seeing the Steelers make the playoffs, the Ravens make the playoffs, the Bengals almost make the playoffs. It's a thing that you got to figure out a way to avoid it. The problem is you've gotten that albatross of a contract. So you try to restructure, you're potentially going to lose Nick Chubb. You never really know with Njoku, with, you know, he's one, he's getting up there, but two, is he going to try to push for a trade because he wants out? You definitely know that Myles Garrett doesn't want to be there anymore. And that's what I was saying with the whole rebuilding thing. You got to be winning in order to keep some of these players happy, because eventually there's one last thing to do if they've made their money, and that's try to get a ring. So maybe we'll see what happens with the Browns and the money. But the other restructuring that's kind of funny to me is the Cowboys get back $57 million in cap space by restructuring Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. And it's really funny because those two have in essence been tied to the hip. CeeDee Lamb has proven, however, that he is sort of quarterback proof. It doesn't really matter who is throwing the ball. CeeDee Lamb is just that damn good. But for Dak, it is kind of turning into you got to get the job done. And, you know, I don't think that for the Cowboys, it's a question of making the playoffs. It's you got to go on a deep run. Even if you lose the NFC Championship game, which, you know, is a distinction in and of itself, to at least be able to get some of the damn memes and jokes about the Cowboys, just not even Super Bowls, but NFC title games out, like get those erased, is worth something. And you kind of have to know that you're towards the end of your career. But where do you think the Cowboys use this money?
I don't know who they're gonna sign. Like, there's not a lot of teams that like. I'm like, who are you gonna sign? Like that. Well, this cap space, it just feels like, unless you're trying to re-sign players, unless you're trying to get like lower end backups or something, I don't know who to re-sign. I mean, it's sad, John. As wrestling fans, we've seen John Cena win 16 world titles, a bunch of U.S. championships, multiple time tag team champion, stayed babyface during this whole run, and he turned heel before the Cowboys made it back to the NFC title game or won another. That's crazy. That's been what? Like, when did Cena turn face? Like 2003? Been like 22 years. 22 years. That's crazy. Yeah, I like, look, shout out to the Cowboys. They made cap space, but then it's just like that Dak contract, is horrible as it is. It's just like, hey man, like it's gonna bite you in the ass later down the line. So I don't know. This franchise is hilarious right now. Like, and I'm pretty sure on Monday when I load up Twitter and stuff, and then I'm looking at all the moves, I'm going to see a bunch of randoms, and I'm just like, who's this? Oh, the Cowboys signed him to a 3-year, $22 million deal. Who is this guy? Like, it's, or like overpay for an older player past their prime, and you're like, what? He's still in the league? Why are the Cowboys giving him 2 years, $24 million? Oh man, I could see Khalil Mack going there just because. Like, I could see Mack signing a nice like 2-year, $36 million contract to get 18 mil a year. Just steal that money from the Cowboys. Hey man, Mack will have like the all-time jersey lineup if he goes to the Cowboys. He was on the Raiders, he was on the Bears, he was on the Chargers, Cowboys. What? That's a great jersey collection to have. That's pretty sick. So I don't see Matt going there because he wants to go to a contender. But if the Cowboys come with all this money they have 56 mil. They can pay a bunch of lower tier guys. Like,
you know, let him be selfish. The way Max Crosby was selfish.
Yeah, I'm cool with Mac being selfish. He's one of my favorite players ever. So Hall of Famer. I'll argue that to the death with anyone. He's a Hall of Famer. It's okay.
But we gotta, we gotta have to. I'm gonna have to bring up a name that Chase is not looking forward to talking about.
Oh.
Leave the memories alone, I suppose. But there are some big names that did get released overall, and we collected them, or the Athletic, I should say, collected them into one nice, tidy graphic. And these are all the cap savings from these players. Now, we joked a little bit earlier about Alex Kappa already signing with the Raiders,
Yeah, I don't know how,
despite
but he did.
the tampering and all that fun stuff. But I guess if you're being released, then I guess maybe there's a little bit more of a wiggle room. But there are huge names on this list: Devontae Adams, Joey Bosa, Drummond Jones. We talked about Tyler Lockett already. Of course, there's Aaron Rodgers of the world. There's also Evan Engram, Darius Slay, and Javon Hargrave. So, one, We'll talk about where we think. I think the big names here are Rodgers, Rankins, and Adams, and maybe you could say Evan Engram. But there's the whole conversation about whether Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers are a package deal, in the sense that if you get one, you can get the other. But a part of me, if I'm Devontae, I don't know if I necessarily want to be with Aaron Rodgers much anymore. So where do you think Adams ends up, and where do you think Rodgers ends up?
I think Adams goes to a West Coast team for sure.
Mm.
A team with warm, like, I think he wants to be on the West Coast just because he has this house in Vegas that is his forever home. So he wants it where it's easy access to that house, even if he had, like, look, he has a lot of money. He can fly back and forth and stuff. Like, so I think like LA, Arizona, both LA teams, Arizona, San Francisco, because San Francisco, they're talking about also maybe trading Ayuk. Like, that's like something they're
Right.
thinking about. And, Adams, he's still really good at football. It's not like Devontae Adams sucks. He's still a top end wide receiver in the league. I feel Adams, I think it's between the Rams and the Chargers, though. I think both those teams have a lot of positives to them. One, they're super close to LAX, so which means Adams could easily get to LAX after the games and fly back to Vegas. Both are creating great facilities. Both have quarterbacks, which is a one thing that, like, Arizona, like, Kyler Murray's good, but I think Adams would get frustrated with Murray running around the pocket. And compared to Herbert and Stafford, more traditional. Herbert's a little hybrid, but I do think Adams is between the Rams and the Chargers. I think those are the final two for Devontae Adams. Please choose the Chargers. I would love to have. I would like, out of all the guys on this list, if I could get Devontae Adams and Evan Engram, I'll be happy. I'll be super happy. I don't.
Evan Engram, I basically have penciled in as a Charger.
Yeah, like, I would love those two so bad. Like, that would just be so, that would help out that would boost our offensive firepower by so much. Ingram, he had that great bounce back on the Jaguars. I think he's a really great tight end. He will pair up well with Disley, who's more of a blocker, but he'll be a good receiving threat. Definitely something that, like, Herbert's been missing and stuff. So, like, I know Evan Ingram's like a little bit older, but man, I would love both those guys. I would love both those guys. But yeah, Adams, I think it's between the Chargers and the Rams. I think those are his two final teams that he's deciding. And it's just, look, here's the rule about Tay Adams. Can you get me the ball? Can you make sure I'm getting the ball, and are we playing football the right way? Both those teams do that. Both those teams will make sure Devontae Adams get the ball. Both those teams have another wide receiver that he can pair up with. It's not like it's like, hi, I'm Tay Adams, and it's just me by myself.
And the other thing that should be noted is complementary. Mm-hmm. Both Puka and McConkey are complementary to Devontae Adams. A part of me felt as though last year, with Garrett Wilson, it just wasn't complementary to what Adams did, and Adams wasn't complimentary to what Garrett did, and so it created not friction in the locker room, but it created friction on the field.
Yeah,
where one or both of them would be open, and you'd be like, which one is Rodgers going to throw to?
Yeah, and then also too, because, like, look, Devontae Adams, he wants to be the number one X wide receiver. He doesn't want it where anyone else is taking away that position from him. Garrett Wilson, that's what he prefers to play. He doesn't want to be like this slot guy that can do everything, or someone else that can play on the outside. McConkey and Nakua, they're cool with playing anywhere on the field at wide receiver. So, like you said, complementary with what Tay Adams wants to do. So I think those are the teams that he will go to because they hit the mark of being on the West Coast, so he can go back to Vegas when he needs to go back. They have quarterbacks, and both teams are in contention to make it to, the playoffs and possibly a Super Bowl. The Rams, like, they still have a really good team in front of them. The Chargers, they can build off what was a great, impressive season. So I think those two teams are the finals. Those are the finalists for one Devontae Adams. Please choose the Chargers. You and Evan Ingram on the Chargers will make me so happy. I could care less if you guys suck. I'll just be happy that we actually got y'all. Like, I'll just be like, wow, we actually tried our best to go all in with these guys. Like, that'll make me happy. I like when teams are a little bit more aggressive. And Adams, he showed, man, he's still a baller, bro. He can still run routes and everything. Like, oh, love this guy.
Where do you think Rodgers ends up?
Who knows? At this point, who knows, man? Like, maybe he goes to Seattle. Fuck it. Rodgers called them up and be like, hey, man, heard Gino's not happy. You guys gonna draft a quarterback? I could build that role for you quite well. I like Jackson Smith and Jigba. I like what you guys do on offense, and we can have some good times. I heard Seattle has really cool weather. I heard that the air there is not as bad for your health, and you guys don't put toxins in there. So I would like to go there and play quarterback for you guys and have a good time. So yeah, I think either Seattle or the Giants. Those are the only two teams I can think of that. The Giants I could see where Dable is like, hey Rodgers, man, come on, just come down the street, man, just come down the street.
Malik got that dog in him. That's the thing. If Rodgers went to the Giants, because I know that's a team that he's been connected to in these conversations, I really don't know if that helps or hurts Malik Neighbors.
It hurts because Rodgers doesn't have he doesn't have the deep ball anymore. He has the deep ball is hit or miss for Rodgers. It's not as consistent as it once was and stuff. But yeah, no, I could see Rodgers. That sounds good, coach. Go down just down the street from my locker, stay in New York, help the Giants, Super Bowl winning organization. You guys won one when I was playing in the league, so I do think that we can win a Super Bowl with this team. The young defense, I think it's a good time. I think it's a good fit. So. Yeah, it just depends what Rodgers wants. How's my Rodgers? I think my Rodgers is pretty good.
Yeah, it is. I think it's going to be another off season where he's in the darkness in the cave. Then he comes out and goes,
John, I feel like you need to try. I think you need to try these darkness retreats. They treat you.
It's just funny because like he went through that whole thing and then comes out of it and says, like in essence, God and the universe told me to be a New York Jet, and like that did not work. That did not work out for him at all.
Well, sometimes faith plays a funny thing. When you put your faith into something, sometimes it doesn't go your way. So it's just testing me to become a better human being at the end. And I feel like I became better because of the experience. Not sad about anything that happened, not mad, not upset. I felt that the relationship ended in the most fair way possible.
It almost kind of sounds like you're doing it almost kind of sounds as though you're doing an impression of Shaquille O'Neal if he was white.
So Rodgers talks so slow. He's just always like, well, I really think that we have to get to the bottom line on this thing that's going on around Pat. Pat, I feel most people are not being educated. Oh, I hear you, Rodgers. I hear you. I mean, Pat, have you ever looked at the documents that came out when COVID came out? I have not. It's very interesting stuff. I'll send it to you later.
Pat actually looked at documents, just any documents.
I'll send it to you later. We're gonna talk about my dog Joey Bosa. He's just
that's what I was saying. I was going to lead with that, and last but not least. What are some of your fondest memories of Joey Bosa as a Charger, and where do you think Joey Bosa goes?
Man, I have many memories where he's pissed me off more than fond memories. Like the playoff game against the Jaguars, we were already melting down, and he threw his helmet like a big baby and stuff. Bosa, first off, shout out to Bosa, the last San Diego Charger on the roster. I was hoping to be one of those guys that stay with our franchise for so many years. It's just when you look at Bosa's numbers, they're really disappointing. Like his impact on the field, his tape, it's fun to watch. But 86 sacks his whole career, and this guy was projected as like the next J.J. Watt and stuff, and he only had 86 sacks during his time. Granted, yes, his first year he held out. Then he's had a lot of years where he's been injured, hurt, or banged up. He's just never really seemed to reach the levels that I know he could have reached as a player. Like Bosa was never like you like the way Joey Bosa gets talked about, you would think he's in DPOY conversations every single year, but he just
Right.
isn't. He's just fine. Like he does his job. There's only two teams. It just depends on which team he wants to go to. I think it's Detroit and I think it's San Francisco. Just depends, San Francisco, obviously, to play with his brother Nick.
Yeah.
Detroit, because hey, that would be a pretty great edge rushing room with a returning Hutchinson, a Davenport. I don't know. Do they still have the guy they traded for? The what was his face on the Browns? They traded for him. Smith. Do they still have
Oh,
Zacchaeus Smith or whatever his name is?
I think they do. I think they
Yeah,
do.
and Bosa. Those four in rotation. Whew.
Yeah.
That'll be good. That'll be good for rotation
And
because
like something like that works in Bosa's favor because you're not being asked to play every day.
yeah.
So
It just depends if like he wants to go to San Francisco and he kind of, he goes to San Francisco and he plays with his brother, or he goes to a situation where he like the Detroit where it's like, hey, they already have like 2 or 3 good pass rushers. I just have to be pass rusher number 4 on this team. And if you can get me because he was playing limited snaps with the Chargers anyways. If you look at his numbers, you're going to be like, ew, that's what his numbers were. But it's like he was barely playing. Like Tuli Tuipulotu and Bud Dupree were playing more than him. Like that's why his numbers were so down and stuff. But when he was on the field, he was good. But yeah, no, shout out to him. He was always like nothing was more exciting than like the first Chargers game of the season or the first 2 Chargers games of the season, and Bosa just looked like a beast. And then you start hyping yourself up. You're like, dude, DPOY. Yeah, this is the year. Finally, Bosa. And then week 3 or week 4, he suffers that stupid injury. And then you're just like, fuck, again? And then you just don't know when he's coming back. And then you're just like, when are you coming back? When are we getting Bosa back? Then he comes back, has a really good game. I think his best game was against Peterman and the Bills, where he just absolutely killed Peterman. That was a infamous Peterman threw 5 interceptions, but I think he had like 3.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I think he had 3 sacks in that game. The Joey Bosa 3. He had a good amount of sacks that game. That's probably like my favorite Bosa game individually as a player. But yeah, man, shout out to him, man. Last remaining San Diego Charger, now off the roster. Kind of bummed, Like I said, I like when my players stay with us for a whole time. You build that bond, that connection, and stuff. Like, if they want to play 1 year somewhere else and then retire like Rivers did, that's fine. Like LT played like 2 more years with the Jets, that's fine. But yeah, it's a bummer. It's a bummer because it was just we overpaid him. That was the problem. We paid him a bunch of money because we thought, oh, he was going to be a premier edge rusher, and he was good. Like he was a good edge rusher. He just wasn't premier. He wasn't a premier edge rusher. Like he was just like what's his most sacks in a season? Like 12? Like I don't think he's ever passed like 12. I can't remember. Let me see. Joey Bosa. I know his rookie year he did good. He had like 8 sacks.
His rookie year
for
was
like
good. But I think you may be right. I don't know if he ever got past 12.
Yeah, his second year with the his second year with the Chargers was 12 and a half.
There it is, yeah.
Yeah. The rest of the time, 11 and a half, 7 and a half, 10 and a half, 2.5 in 2022, but he got injured early. And that was the very, very, very like that was going to be Bosa's year as one of the best defenders in the league. 6.5 at 2023, and then this year, only 5. So like, and like I said, career sacks, only 72 career sacks. I gave him more sacks than the credit to. 72 career sacks in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year career. Like drafted 3rd overall. Like this guy was supposed to be a generational pass rusher.
Yeah,
generational. Like it's not like he was like some average pass rusher. Like the way they were hyping up Bosa, they were acting like this guy was generational. I remember I was shocked when the Chargers chose him. I wasn't expecting to choose Joey Bosa. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then the Chargers like, yeah, we're going to take Joey Bosa. And I was like, okay. I wasn't happy with the pick. I was like, great. I'm not going to like this guy. Ended up liking him, but yeah, hope he wins a ring.
And last but not least, just like last time. And now we can see there's maybe been a little bit of movement. Oh, look who's now at 6 to the Raiders. Look who's now at 6 to the
Oh,
Raiders.
Genty.
But Cam Ward stays at the top. Abdul Carter stays where he stays put. Shador stays put. I think Travis Hunter also stayed put. But now we see a little bit of movement. Now we've got the Jets taking Tet McMillan at 7. We see Jonty moving up to 6. And it's interesting because one thing I think is interesting is seeing the Bears pick change. Before it was Kelvin Banks, now it's Armand Membu. So I'm interested to see. Like I didn't get to see too much of the offensive lineman stuff from the scouting combine because it was on a Sunday and I was doing some things. But I'm going to see him moving up there. One thing that I did think is kind of interesting is Tyler Warren now at 13 to the Dolphins of all teams. That's kind of surprising. Like, I don't think they necessarily need a tight end. I mean, I get the whole Jonnu Smith thing, but like he's 29 years old, but he was having a good season. But like, I don't know if you necessarily need at 13, specifically if you don't know how long Tyreek Hill's going to be there. That might be a time to.
Yeah.
I mean, not that there's really that great wide receivers besides Tech McMillan. I mean, granted, Golden's moving up. There is Luther Burden. Like there is wide receivers that are standouts. Maybe not at 13. So maybe you go, hey, yeah, let's just get the tight end, get Warren. We can use him as kind of a jack of all trades if we do lose Tyreek and we've just got Waddle, but we do. And so Waddle, Achane, Tyreek, and Warren does sound like a pretty good combination. So perspective, I mean, I like it from the offensive perspective, but you know,
I just don't think Tyler Warren's as good as Brock Bowers. Like Brock Bowers is like a unicorn. Tyler Warren, like he's fine, but it's just like I don't know. Look, you have other things to draft. I wouldn't draft the tight end at number 13.
But I think it's interesting.
They're disrespecting my dog Kenneth Grant. I think Grant's going to go up there, man. He's good. Kenneth Grant, yeah, I like him a lot, man. I think he would help the Bengals at 17 for sure, but Jahad Campbell's at 16. No, shout out, Roll Tide.
Yeah, you know what's interesting though is we're talking about the combine and what it means and how you can move. Matthew Golden was definitely not at 21 before, because before 21 Tankathon had Igbuka going to the Steelers. Now it's Golden and they have Igbuka going at 25 to the Texans. So that'll be.
I think Golden's hand size also helped him out too. You know, not only is he fast, he has big hands, so that helps out a lot.
But here you go. Before at 11, they have the Niners now taking Will Johnson. Before they were taking James Pierce Jr. And now he has dropped down to 29 with the Commanders. I was like, God dang, that's a huge drop. Like that sucks. You know, like when I was reading about the interviews that he was having, and you know what it reminded me of? That terrible ass movie that I rewatch every year before Draft Day called Draft Day. Because
it's not terrible. It's a great movie.
No, like it's terrible in the sense of like it's so unrealistic. But it's amazing.
If you're the Jaguars, why did you sign off to be the most stupidest front office in the movie? Like, yeah, we'll give you your picks back. Like what? Like, I would have not. Like, I would have said, hey, make up teams. Don't say real NFL. You know, like other TV shows. Like, there's this new TV show that came out on Netflix called Running Point. Really funny show.
Yeah. We gotta watch that. Yeah,
it's so because it's like based off the Lakers, but obviously. You don't want it where people think, oh, is this really what goes on in the Lakers front office? So they have the LA Waves and they make up these teams. That's when actual teams are like, please don't use our name, image, and likeness. They could have done a sports movie, but they wanted to make it feel realistic. It was so stupid. They made it
realistic. But like I love the movie just from like how kind of corny it is, but like it's so unrealistic. I'm like, this is terrible. But every year I watch it before the draft. Like
that movie has a good cast for no reason too. like you look at draft day has a good cast for no reason.
Right. So That's what I'm saying. What it reminds me of, what this James Pierce situation reminds me of, is Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace. It reminds me of his character, who was an edge rusher, which I was like, wait a minute, this is too funny. So and that scene where Costner's like, GMs hate it when players are talking too much and da 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 da. But I'm like, man, you had one job. You had one job, James Pierce Jr. You were going to be a damn near top 10 talent. Maybe you did go 11. Maybe you went 10. Maybe you went 12. But, like, you were going to be highly picked. And interviews, you talking, like, literally everything was under your control. And just you talking was what hurt you. I was like, oh, that sucks.
But yeah, I'm relooking at Kevin Costner, Jennifer Garner, Dennis Leary, Frank Lagella, Sam Elliott, Terry Crews, Sean Combs, like Chadwick Boseman wrestling. I'm like, bro, the bucket. And I was like wondering, like, how much was this movie budget? Only $25 million. And I'm like, dang. I'm like, got all most of the budget went to those actors, because I'm like, why does this movie have a good cast? Like, it's just like, it's a movie about them talking about
a solid $5 million went to Costner, probably $2.5 million went to Jennifer Garner, then a little bit of money for Dennis Leary because of what was it, Rescue Me, like Rescue Me.
What was Draft Day? I'm trying to figure out the
release date. Wait, what year was it?
Draft Day was because like Boseman had 42 2014, because is this before 42?
It's before Black Panther.
Oh yeah, wait. That's where. Well, I feel Boseman's breakout role was 42.
No, I agree. I agree with you that the breakout was there, but like the commercial viability and the ability to ask for money in negotiations, that didn't happen until Black Panther. That's like, you got to remember, back in the, I want to say back in the day, it was 7 years ago, but like, I mean, back in the day, Marvel made their bread and butter by hiring relatively unknown people. Hemsworth had done nothing really before Thor, like
on cheap ass deals too. Like they signed them. They signed them to these like rookie deals and stuff.
Yeah. His big role before this was as Captain Kirk's dad, who dies in the first 5 minutes of Star Trek. Chris Evans, who had made great movies beforehand, like the Scott Pilgrims of the world and granted the Fantastic Fours and all that. I mean, that weren't great movies, but like commercial, right? Like, but like he wasn't that super well known as an actor to be making or demanding able to walk in and
he was getting typecast as like you're gonna play this character, and and Captain America was like the first movie where he could actually. We're getting to the entertainment side of this channel. Calm down, guys. It's okay.
But like the big money from that Marvel doled out in the beginning, all of it went to realistically, if you think about it, it would have gone to Ed Norton, who they ended up dropping anyway and getting Ruffalo. And Ruffalo also would have been relatively cheap, so that counterbalanced it. And it went to Scarlett Johansson, because Robert Downey Jr., as big of a name as he
needed a comeback.
He was going through drug issues and all that kind of stuff. It was considered a risk giving him the role of
Iron Man. Remember that too, because like my mom said that too, like, oh man, like Iron Man's Robert Downey Jr., that's not going to be good. I remember her saying that. I was just like, wow, really? Like, I thought he was a good actor, but I didn't know he was going through all these like personal like my favorite thing of all time about like the Marvel things. There's two things actually, but my favorite thing is Robert Downey Jr. pulling the greatest move of all time, where he's like, "Oh, you guys want me to be in Spider-Man? Yeah, I'll only be in Spider-Man if I get half of the box office, because I'm going to be the reason why people are going to this movie, not because of Spider-Man. It's because of Robert Downey Jr." And somehow, some way, he got box office money from Spider-Man: Homecoming. Because,
I mean, nowadays, if you're a big enough actor, getting points on movies is not like you.
Especially like a movie where you just filmed like a few scenes in, like you only did those scenes to get the box office because you believed that you were the big draw.
And a part of me wants to believe that they wrote that joke in Spider-Man. I mean, like kind of an inside joke of the whole thing of like, because the first time he's talking to him, he's not actually in the suit. And then it's like a part of me was like, that's got to be some kind of an inside joke, at least to them. It worked out for the purposes of the story, absolutely. But like, part of me was like, that could be like a little bit of inside baseball.
Yeah,
Thing.
and and then the other favorite is dicking over ScarJo when they were like, "Oh, we won't release your movie on Disney Plus. Put it on Disney Plus because she was going to get box office points for Black Widow, and because of
I should correct myself. The majority of the money would have gone to Ed Norton, Scarlett Johansson, and Samuel L. Jackson.
yeah,
Samuel L.
Samuel.
Jackson was a name and still is a name.
Yeah,
But
no, he and you could tell like they were like, a few scenes, Sam. We don't got much for you anymore.
no, but he signed a 9-picture deal.
Nothing's worse than Andrew Garfield stuck with that 20-film Sony contract that he signed for Amazing Spider-Man. Did you know about this? Or
I got to read up on this.
So Garfield, when he first signed with Sony, the Amazing Spider-Man movies, they were going to make all the villain movies. But what's going to be different about all the villain movies that they've made was that Spider-Man was going to be in all the movies. So they signed Garfield to like this 11 film Sony contract where he would be like not only in his Amazing Spider-Man movies, but he was going to be in the Black Cat movie. He was going to be in the Sinister Six movie. He was going to be in these movies. So that way, when people go to the theater, they're not like, well, this makes no sense. There's no Spider-Man. Well, Spider-Man's in the movie. So like you can't complain that there's no Spider-Man when Spider-Man is right here.
Irony of ironies, they ran into the problem where they couldn't get Tom Holland into all of those Sonyverse movies, Sony Spider-Verse movies, and they all tanked. I mean, granted, terrible. A lot of those were because of terrible writing, terrible filming, and horrible like CGI effects.
I like the Venom.
Would have at least been good for like another maybe $50 to $100 million in tickets. Yeah. Probably around somewhere between that.
Seeing the villains interact with Spider-Man is like the interesting part. Like know, like and they also were handicapped because they couldn't say the name Spider-Man. They couldn't say like the certain character names. Like if you ever watch Black Widow, they can't mention Spider-Man. They can't mention Ben Parker. Like they call him just Ben in the movie. They're like, oh yeah, it's Ben. It's like Ben who? Well, you can't say the name because Marvel owns it. You don't own it. You sold all the Spider-Man rights back to Marvel. So like you have the rights to like certain characters, but yeah, if you're
gonna make a Spider-Man movie, it's a joint production.
Yeah. It's always funny when you go to Orlando. Like that Universal Studios has a way better Marvel section than like Disney World. Disney World's Marvel is so ass compared to like Universal Studios, and they're banking on the MCU stuff too. Like they still sell some of the MCU stuff at their stores as well. So it's like pretty funny. But yeah, man, it's interesting with Marvel to see where they go moving forward. With the MCU, it's a great segue because me and SP3 will be on here Sunday to talk about Daredevil Born Again, episode 1 and episode 2. So tune into that one.
So I haven't seen them yet, and it's going to be a while probably before I see them because I decided like maybe a month or so ago that I was going to take Colleen through all those Netflix series.
Oh, those are so great.
So I've gotten her through Daredevil season 1. I've gotten her through Jessica Jones season 1. We're almost halfway through Luke Cage, and that's where I'm probably going to stop it because after Stokes dies, it kind of gets bad. Yeah. And we'll do a couple episodes of Iron Fist, not because it's really that important, but simply because how often
to set up Defenders.
Well, no, I mean, yes, but also how often does she get to see a cool fictional character that she has the same name as? And then get to Daredevil season 2, Defenders, and then I got to do Daredevil season 3 because I know somebody's in season 3 who comes back in Born Again. So I'm like,
every season of Daredevil. You even have to like watch a little bit of Echo because they bring up some stuff in Born Again about Echo.
I'll tell her about that. But like in my head, I'm like, okay, so 13 episodes. Defenders was 8 episodes. So 13, 26, 8 is 34. Maybe 2 or 3 episodes of Iron Fist and 2 episodes. I'm like, that's 40 episodes and each one's an hour. I was like, damn it.
Some of them are like an hour 30 too, because
it's honestly it's the first time that I am grateful that Disney releases episodes once a week, Because if all of them had come out like they used to with the Netflix thing, I would be pissed. Because I'm like, there's no way for me to avoid spoilers for an entire season's worth of stuff and everything that's going to happen. But on a week to week basis, I can like kind of dodge, spoilers here and there, and then be like, okay, Colleen, you're home from work because you work nights overnight. Okay, we're gonna get through like 3 episodes today. All right, next day 3 episodes. Just try to cut into that and get to where we need to be. But what I wanted to ask you was, let's take a look at what Tankathon is projecting for Denver and for the Chargers. So for round 1, they've got Denver taking Colson Loveland. As long as that stays, I will be happy. And they've got the Chargers taking Walter Nolan, defensive line out of Ole Miss. How do you feel about that one?
I like it. Walter Nolan's not my favorite D-line prospect, but he fits the Jim Harbaugh build of 6'4", big old meaty guy. And I'm sure the Chargers looked at what the Eagles did for success, and that's what the Chargers want to do for success: build through the trenches, have the trenches win the battles for you to make the other positions easy. One thing the Chargers have been lacking for a while now is just like a strong, since like Jamal Williams, like that was our last really like beast defensive tackle. Yeah, we had some years with like Corey Leggett, like he was good for a couple years, and then a couple other players stepped up big for us, but we haven't had like that run stuffing big old defensive lineman that just does everything on a 3-down basis. And Walter Nolan, he could definitely do that. He could be someone that pairs up well if the Chargers do keep a Tyler Tart or a Puna Ford on the roster, or if they go out and sign a Milton Williams, who's going to be a free agent from the Eagles. So I like this one. Like look, for me, the Chargers in the draft, D-line, edge. If you get a skilled player, it's because that skilled player fall to you. Don't reach for a skilled player. But let's say a Matthew Golden, a Tatiro McMillan, a Genty. If Omarion Hampton is your best guy, then go with Omarion Hampton.
What I was going to say was, this to me is the season to take the running back of the future.
Yeah.
For the Chargers, because J.K. Dobbins is being held together by
hopes and prayers.
Hope and Harbaugh dark magic, and behind him there's really not that much, so you might as well get the guy.
I heard Will Johnson, like he's been having hamstring issues. If he fell to 22, I'll take him. I'll take him. He's tremendous.
We covered the Raiders taking Johnson, and who do they have the Chiefs taking? A tackle from Oregon. Okay, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, he's fine. He's solid.
Round 2. Oh, look at who they got the Bears taking. Look at that.
No, that would be kind of a crazy pickup.
They've got the Jets taking Jackson Dart in the second. But and then but now because the Cowboys can't get Chauncey, they go with Travion Henderson, who will not be that much of a drop off. But then we've got the Broncos taking Caleb Johnson. I think I would like that. I'm not that well versed on Caleb Johnson, but like everything I've read has been good for him. And Mason Taylor, tight end for LSU, for the Chargers. How do you feel about that one?
Not really big on that one, to be honest. Like Taylor, he's good at pass catching, blocking. He's solid. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like a second round like prospect. Like that feels like someone that you need to like build up. And like with the Chargers, you want guys that will play right away and make an impact right away. Taylor doesn't seem like an impact type of guy. Like he seems like you guys drafted him because you have 2 older tight ends on your roster and you just want a young guy to learn underneath them. So
right.
Yeah, so Taylor, like there's other guys like I would go with the running back in this situation, or a quarterback you like, or maybe an edge rusher that's like you feel like you can get potential out of. Like that's what I would do in the second round. Mason Taylor, it's not the most sexiest pick. It's not a pick where I'm like, oh, this helps the Chargers. It's more of like, oh, let's go ahead and like take a guy that maybe can turn out good for us. Like he has good acclimates. He's tough. I'll say that.
They got the Raiders taking Benjamin Morrison, cornerback out of Notre Dame. Let me ask you this though. Where I just saw the name too. If this guy drops, if Elijah Arroyo drops to the Chargers in the second round, would you want him?
Yeah, I would like Elijah Arroyo.
Gotcha.
Yeah, he's good.
it's more specifically the Mason Taylor than as opposed to a tight end itself.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's just Mason Taylor. I don't think like that's not
All
like
right,
a
what is
guy.
this nonsense?
Yeah, it's like
No. Look at that Chiefs pick.
Quinson Judkins. Oh, I didn't even. I thought Judkins was taken earlier in the day. Yeah, give me Judkins. I'll take Judkins at
Yeah,
55.
why do the Chiefs need another running back?
Yeah, dude.
All right, then here we've got Iomanor to the Raiders in the third. Then we've got for the Broncos Jordan Phillips, D line. Denver does need D line. They've got Jared Ivey, edge rusher, Old Miss for the Chargers, and a D lineman for the Chiefs. So how do you feel about Jared Ivey as edge rusher from Ole Miss?
I like him a lot. He fits like the mold of being like a big old guy that can like get to the quarterback. Doesn't have like the speed that you want as an edge rusher, but he's powerful. And Harbaugh likes that, maybe to complement what Tuli Tuapatola does. I think want to say Ivy is also a little bit older. I can't remember his age. I didn't really look at his age. I want to say he's 23 years old. So he's one of those guys that's played a lot of college football, a lot of SEC experience. So he has like a lot of experience, and that's something that like, hey, look, I think age is only a number right now when it comes to football. So having that kind of experience, and you played a lot of football. You first played at Georgia Tech, and then you went to Ole Miss for the last 2 years, and you did well over there. Yeah, I think it would be a good pickup. He's not a speedster. He's a nice little power guy, but he would be definitely someone that I would be happy with. And like I said, a little bit older, but he's played a lot of football. And playing a lot of football, I think, is just as important as sometimes being young.
Yeah, it can be. With age comes experience. But guys, we want to thank you for tuning in as always. Tru Offseason 2. Like I said last time, we're not sure if we're going to be able to connect on everything NFL every single week. However, sometimes we want to let the news kind of build a little bit because things happen and things change, and then you start seeing how all of it fits together. There's still out there the Rams allowing Cooper Kupp to get a trade or letting him know that they're going to be trading him. There's also Stafford letting him look for potential trade partners. How that's going to fit in, we want to see first. There's plenty of teams
they said Stafford's staying. They said Stafford's.
Oh, they did.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's staying. He realized Stafford was just like it makes no sense. I'm just
case in point. Like
yeah.
For some of these players, we can talk about what's a good landing spot and things like that. But sometimes if you let it marinate a little bit more, Stafford goes, LA isn't that bad, and we will continue to see what happens with the Cooper Kupps of the world. But as we get closer to free agency happening, so next week I think we will probably have an episode, and then as we get closer and closer to the draft, April 24th. We'll be talking more, and we'll be checking in with you guys as we move along. But Chase, let the people know where they can find you, good sir.
Yeah, you guys can follow me on X at ChaseOliver68. I might be posting stuff on my own YouTube soon, but when I start, I don't want to start the ball because I have something coming up in March, and I don't want to upload content and then just go dead again. So I want to do it when I feel really good to upload content, so I'll keep you guys updated. But until then, you can catch me on the Round the Point Network, where we talk about pro wrestling, and you can also catch me on Tru Heat, where I most likely will be on the Revolution watch along if we do one. So we'll watch along AEW Revolution, which should be a good show. And then also on that Sunday, come back here on the Tru Heat Sports and Entertainment Channel. SP3 and I will talk about episode 1 and 2 of Daredevil Born Again. Oh, welcome back, Daredevil. Welcome back. I have missed you.
And you guys can always catch me here on Tru Elite Sports and Entertainment. I pop in from time to time for the wrestling watch-alongs. I try to do that a little bit more this year. But
join us for Revolution, man. There's gonna be a bunch of 5-star matches on there.
Well, so my rule is if I'm watching a pay-per-view with Colleen, I don't want you guys in the background.
Oh yeah.
Particularly because women's matches come on, and sometimes we're not the most respectful when it comes to women.
I'm always respectful.
I didn't say you.
Steve is never respectful.
I didn't name names. That's why I just use the collective we.
Yeah.
And so it's better sometimes for my wife to not hear those things. However, for everyone watching, it's great for you to hear those things. So catch Chase on the watch along for
If we do
Revolution.
one.
What?
If we do one. I don't know. It's up to
If we do,
Romeo.
I have a feeling Romeo will do one. Something tells me. But guys, until next time when we check in with you guys, take care of yourselves and each other, and we will catch you all later.